Dan Proft back with John Tillman, President and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. And John, as we know, but sometimes we forget, corruption, hinky dealings, government waste, not the exclusive province of the city of Chicago.
No, in fact, you can go all the way to the tip of southern Illinois, which, by the way, is farther south than Richmond, Virginia, to give you some context of how big this state is north to south, down to Cairo, where we have a really interesting story about that.
And we do. We have a reporter, Molly Parker, from the Southern Illinoisan newspaper down there who's been covering this Cairo housing complex story in Alexander County. She joins us now. Molly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan. How are you doing?
Good. So explain what's going on down there. From the stories I read in your newspaper, it appears that they're, outside of the employees of this housing authority, federal housing project, and the management, in addition to the collective bargaining agreement, there were some side agreements also cut, which is problematic. But give us a picture of what exactly you have uncovered at the Alexander County Housing Authority.
Well, I would say, first of all, it's just a case of what appears to be corruption and mismanagement of a level I've not encountered in 10 years of reporting. It's not necessarily so much for the amount of money that is alleged to have been squandered on inappropriate spending as the fact that these folks are entrusted with overseeing the poorest probably the poorest county in Illinois, one of the poorest counties in the country. I don't know how they rank lately, but certainly just a destitute county with an extreme amount of poverty. And they have just mismanaged the housing authority into such financial turmoil that as late as a few months ago, they weren't sure they could keep the lights on and meet payroll.
I think one of the things that's interesting about this, it goes to the story of lack of accountability, how long it took for this story to be uncovered, and thank God you did this work, and the victims it creates of people who think that the federal government is going to be their keeper and take care of them. They live in a life of dependency for their housing, and I think the headline in your paper was Squalor and Fear. I think that's what the real human tragedy is of this. You talked to some of the people that are living in those buildings. What were the stories they told you about the human condition that they're trying to survive in?
Yeah, these folks just talk about living in public housing units. One person told me that in the last month they had killed over 50 rats. And you wonder when stories get a little exaggerated, but they'll say these rats are wrong, or and I don't know that that's the case, but they certainly are living among rats and other infestation. They have had several bed bug epidemics that have just gone untreated, and bed bugs happen in complexes and in hotels of all sorts, but the fact that they, weren't taking care of these issues, kids are covered in bites. There's, allegations of or thoughts that black mold is covering sinks and bathtubs. They've uncovered asbestos in several apartments and had to remove some tenants who had been living among that. So, you wonder if there's going to also be long-term health consequences, particularly for the young children living there.
And we're talking about, obviously, largely poor folks. We're talking about 97% of the residents of this housing project are African American. And so if you can, just speak to exactly where the money went, apparently, instead of where it should have gone to address some of the problems you just described.
Yeah, and a couple things happened. It looks like from reading the HUD documentation, which is, over 100 pages long, they came in 2013 and did just a routine audit, it appears, and uncovered some problematic areas, and came back in 2014 in the summer and did a non-routine audit and really began to look into some of these issues, including contracts for the executive director for hours he was not documenting. And then after they questioned the contract, they just gave him a legal settlement for the same amount of his contract after HUD said they couldn't pay it. So now he's getting, quite a bit of money, several $1,000s, up to, I think he had a $45,000 legal settlement and a $15,000 contract. There's just all sorts of money going to him and others.
And the him is.
But there was also a federal sequestration. I mean, I have to be fair. So you look at the documents; they lost about $1.3 million over 3 fiscal years from what they had in operating revenue at a surplus to then they became into a deficit. There was a sequestration there that affected all housing authorities to call them to draw down some of those reserves, but others knew that was coming and were able to spend down some of those reserves on needs while, this is being run by somebody who at this point had no qualifications to be an executive director, had a GED, had no idea what she was doing. And then on top of that, there were all the retirement incentives and the misspent money on employees. I think that totaled close to $300,000.
A rather stark statement from a former executive director of the Housing Authority in Alexander County, James Wilson. And I appreciate his candor, but good grief. I tell everybody we're just like the state of Illinois. We lived it up too good, and we didn't see this coming, and we thought it would last forever. And when the federal cuts came, we weren't in a position to handle it. We lived it up too good, just like the state of Illinois. It doesn't excuse what sounds to me a lot like criminal conduct, and I understand Representative Bost is initiating an inquiry into this as well.
Yeah, Representative Bost, we reached out to him, and his office said he's certainly aware of what's going on there. They did not go so far as to say, we're calling for some sort of federal panel or oversight or investigation here, but I do think that they are probably doing more behind the scenes than they have put forth. I also reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office, had some questions about who has jurisdiction down there. Certainly the state's attorney there does. I have not been able to get a call back from that gentleman. The Illinois Attorney General's Office can only investigate if there's a request.
If she was awake?
Officials.
Yes,
Sorry.
right, yes.
Couldn't help myself there, Molly, sorry.
You what?
I said I couldn't help myself. The Attorney General's Office, it's a legendary investigative capacity where all these corruption investigations have provided so much transparency and sunlight to the state of Illinois from Lisa Madigan's Attorney General's Office. I'm just editorializing
all I know is
a little.
What they told me is that they did not have jurisdiction to investigate. I'm not getting into any
of course not
statement there. Just what they've repeated to me.
Right.
The U.S. Attorney's Office said they can't confirm or deny an investigation, which is very typical for them to say, but they did tell me that they are very aware of the reports that have surfaced and the federal HUD and documentation that's come forward, and so I kind of reading between the lines there. I think that there are folks that are at least aware of the situation. I don't know.
Well, let's hope it moves
how far any sort of criminal investigation goes, but people are certainly calling for one.
Let's hope it goes from awareness to action. She is Molly Parker, reporter for the Southern Illinoisan. The series, check out online at thesouthern.com, Chaos in Cairo. Molly, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right, Dan, thank you.